Hello and welcome to the Oregonian Sports Podcast. I'm Bill Oram. Hey, if you're here, you enjoy listening to me and others from the Oregonian talk about sports in the great state of Oregon, Beavers, Ducks, Blazers, Timbers, Thorns, high schools, then you will love our new texting service. All you have to do to receive text messages from myself, Nick Daschel, James Crepia, Joe Freeman, Nick Strang, Ryan Clark, shoot a text to 503-386-0095. And for 2 weeks, you will get free text messages every day from all of us here at the Oregonian Sports. That's 503-386-0095. That's a free 2-week trial. And after that, just $3.99 a month. $3.99 a month if you text 503-386-0095. Can't recommend this service enough because you get to hear from not only me, but also my great colleagues, including Nick Daschel. And Nick, by the way, is our guest today on the Oregonian Sports Podcast, here to break down the Beavers game this weekend against Stanford. 7-2 Beavers, I should say, coming off a win against Colorado with 3 pretty big weeks ahead of them. And maybe even, if things break right, a trip to the Pac-12 championship game in Las Vegas. Nick, how are we doing today?
I'm just great. Did you need more? Did you need more of need more explanation, or me to, or whatnot, or?
So Nick, you were in Boulder.
Are we here to talk about the Beavers or me going to Les Mis last night?
I do actually. You know what? I'm glad you said that. How did you enjoy Les Mis at Keller Auditorium on a Tuesday night?
You know, the music's good. I'm a little fuzzy on the storyline, which I'm not supposed to say because everybody thinks it's the greatest musical ever, but the music was great. And the sets were great, and I guess if I was a little deeper in it, I'd probably the storyline was a little fuzzy to me, so I have to read up on it. And don't look at me like that.
Valjean stole a loaf of bread. He spends his life in shackles. Inspector Javert is in charge of the work crew he's on. He escapes. He chases him across the land for years and years. In that time, Jean Valjean meets a dying prostitute named Fantine. Fantine has a daughter named Cosette, who she has given up to a crazy couple that runs an inn, and that's the master of the house, keeper of that guy. So then Jean Valjean goes and rescues Cosette and takes him as his own daughter, and he matriculates through life and becomes the mayor of his town. But then Javert finds him, and then they have the confrontation. Jean Valjean. No, that's not it. It's Monsieur le Maire. We see each other plain. That one. And then Javert realizes how horrible it was that he has devoted his life to trying to track down Jean Valjean. So then he jumps to his death into the river. Meanwhile, the French Revolution is happening, and we get a whole new cast of characters. Little people do. And then boom! And then you're just like, no, not the little boy. But then also, so then Cosette is grown and she's fallen in love with a revolutionary. But then, unfortunately, Jean Valjean falls ill and Jean Valjean is dying. And he tells Marius the story. And then Cosette comes and they all love each other at the end. And I haven't even gotten to Eponine on my own, pretending but that is also a very powerful storyline, and we just don't even have time to get to that. So anyway, the Beavers open as a multiple touchdown favorite against Stanford.
Were you that up on? Were you that up on Les Mis the first time you saw it?
The first time I saw Les Mis was also at Keller Auditorium. I feel like, to my memory, it was in French, but I was very young. It's also possible it wasn't in French, and it just seemed like French to me at the time. But I love Les Mis. Les Mis is tremendous. Les Mis is the gold standard of ambitious theater, obviously, of that style of musical theater. And obviously, musical theater has been reinvented many, many times. But I've seen some great productions of Les Mis. Love Les Mis.
And Les Mis rhymes with another one of your favorites, Grizz.
Go Grizz, absolutely. The University of Montana.
Yeah. All right,
So Nick,
we've got way off the exit here, so we better veer this thing back onto I-5.
do you think? I mean, do you think though that like what is the most powerful number in Les Mis in your opinion? Because I think there's probably like there's a few contenders. I mean, obviously, I Dreamed a Dream. You know, we've all heard Susan Boyle's rendition, but I mean that's obviously a showstopper. On My Own is a showstopper. Castle on a Cloud is a showstopper. Master of the House is probably the most fun. But also the confrontation between Javert and Valjean, I think, is almost maybe the dramatic peak of the show. Was there a moment that just grabbed you as an observer and somebody who wasn't familiar?
I can't say that I can rattle off the tunes like you can. I should have really done a lot of research on this before I went last night because, I mean, I'll have to see it again. I just say that. I've seen several. I go to a half a dozen musicals a year. I'm just not your. I might be semi-cultured. You know what else I saw there? You know what else I saw at Les Mis last night was University of Portland athletic director Scott Lycum.
Oh,
we talked about how cultured we were.
The Pilot women had a huge win in their season opener, basketball season opener against San Diego State. The Pilot men, I believe, are ranked in the top 15 as they wrap up their soccer season. A lot to talk about with the Pilots there. What I would say, Nick, about Les Mis, watch the film version, the Hugh Jackman, Anne Hathaway version. I mean, there's it's not perfect, right? I mean, kind of famously casting Russell Crowe as Javert was curious, and he can't sing, which would not be would not be disqualifying for most roles that Russell Crowe has done, but for Inspector Javert, I think, certainly disqualifying, and especially kind of takes some of the weight out of the suicide scene, frankly. But in terms of understanding the story, I think seeing it cinematically with like much more complete sets and maybe more visual cues really helps. And I mean, Sacha Baron Cohen in that is just a treat, along with Helena Bonham Carter, as the innkeepers. They're delightful. It's fun, and so I recommend you watch that.
I mean,
at some
I've
point.
seen probably 20 musicals at Keller in the last 2.5 years, maybe. I'd say the music from this one was probably number one. I mean, it was just the singing was spectacular, and that's your Beaver podcast for this week, sports fans.
I was gonna say, how long can we milk this? All right, so what's next on the musical docket? By the way, what's coming through Keller next?
The Lion King.
I think I'm going to that. I think my mom is taking our 7-year-old, and my wife and I were able to glom on as well.
I could take my daughter and her boyfriend. So yeah, we.
Do you understand the plot of Lion King, and do you know that it's based on Hamlet by William Shakespeare?
Bill, come on.
What?
My daughter.
I'm not making this up.
My oldest daughter is like the number one fan of all things Disney. I've been to Disneyland. 20 times. If there's one thing I know, it's Disney stuff. So,
okay. So, what is the best number in The Lion King? Do you think?
I mean, I don't know. I guess I know. I'd have to go through the whole thing to know. I mean, I haven't seen the musical, but I've seen
the film. Yeah,
the film.
I was gonna ask if you'd seen it in theater. I haven't seen it.
It's obviously a good. Is obviously a good.
Hakuna Matata.
Yeah.
What a wonderful phrase. No, I mean the best song in Lion King, and especially the stage version. Once you see it, the way that it's presented is certainly Circle of Life, but. Can You Feel the Love Tonight? Especially the single version by Elton John. I Just Can't Wait to Be King. Man, there's some bops in Lion King. And so I'm excited for you to see it. I think I'm going to get out there as well. So we're going to have to compare notes on a future podcast. All right. I guess we need to talk about the Beavers. Should we do it?
I guess.
All right. Where is the excitement? The Beavers are 7-2. They're up to
the 7-2 Oregon State Beavers.
They're up to 12th in the college football playoff ranking after after beating Colorado. And by the way, Jonathan Smith made a good point, and I think it just bears repeating. Not only did Colorado not really move the ball or have any success offensively. This is a hard pivot from our musical talk to now like Oregon State's defense. But not only did they not have any success moving the ball until the fourth quarter, I think they were at 78 yards through three quarters.
Yeah, 78 yards after three.
Just very close to 76 trombones from Meredith Wilson's The Music Man. But Colorado had 5 points up to that time. And you really couldn't blame any of those on the defense, right? The field goal that Colorado got was the result of a turnover in the red zone, and then Oregon State's defense got a 3-and-out, so Colorado kicked the field goal, and then it was the 2-point conversion, the botched 2-point conversion that got run back, 100 yards by the Buffs as well. So, Oregon State's defense, I would say, has really responded to the two losses this year. Coming off of Washington State, goes home and really shows out against Utah, which is probably the win of the year for the Beavers so far. And then after the loss at Arizona, that defense really showed up against Colorado. And by the way, I think we were both sort of the mind Colorado might have some success throwing against the Beavers just because the DBs have been a little inconsistent this year. So I thought for Oregon State's defense to perform like it did through the first three quarters against Colorado was really impressive. What say you, Music Man?
Yeah, I mean, we saw Oregon State's defense finally back intact with everybody that you would expect to be in the lineup outside of Skylar Thomas, who hasn't played all season because he tore his ACL in camp. So outside of him, we saw everybody that Oregon State would want on the field for defense on Saturday, and 78 yards says it all. I'll buy some of what Jonathan.
It led
I'll
the
buy
big
what
parade.
some of Jonathan said about the fourth quarter about guys perhaps being a little gassed. I mean, several of those guys were coming back off injuries. I mean, the altitude had to be a little bit of a factor, I would guess. I mean, I know athletes like you and me, we could handle it, but we were doing a lot of wind sprints up in the press box, and I was feeling a little gassed in the fourth quarter. But no, I could buy that they that was part of the issue. I mean, some of it was just some breakdowns too. But still, the defense looked good when they needed to look good, and you want it makes you feel a little more, gives you a little more confidence, I guess, going into this stretch run where you're going to face two Heisman Trophy contenders, after Stanford. So, and even Stanford, they're not exactly, stumbling down the stretch here. They're picking up some momentum. So that's I guess what I'm saying is this defense played well. Gives you some hope here coming down the stretch.
Well, and Stanford, to your point, has done something that Oregon State was not able to do this year, which was go win a game on the Palouse against Washington State, and then played both USC and UW well and beat Colorado. So Stanford, God, I just can't see the Beavers losing at home to that team, but Stanford has certainly developed a little bit of an identity under first-year coach Troy Taylor. Troy Taylor, has a great reputation. He had Montana's number in the Big Sky Conference, which is not a small thing, let me tell you, as somebody who paid attention to that the last few years. So, he's obviously got them on the right track, and they're going to be a real factor in the ACC for years to come. But on Saturday, do you see Stanford as I saw you pushing back on Twitter a little bit to the terminology trap game, which I think gets overused in college sports. But do you see Stanford as a potential stumbling block for the Beavers with all of that they have to play for in the final 2 weeks if they can get past the card?
Yeah, there's a section of Beaver fan base that any game that's not against a team that's in the top 25 these days is a trap game. I just feel under Jonathan, he gets them pretty well focused for each game. They've done a pretty good job over his tenure of doing the cliched, we're looking to go 1-0 this week. That's just been my experience. They don't really have a lot of lulls, I guess. And I don't know how you could look at Stanford as a free square like maybe you could have a couple months ago. They've just won 2 road games against Pac-12 teams. Granted, one was Colorado, one was Washington State, but they still won those games. So at least they can carry what they've got on the road, at least defensively. You asked me the other day, could Oregon State lose this game? I just no, they can't. If it was at Stanford, I would say yes, there's a chance. They're not losing this game at Reser. I don't think they just play at another level in that stadium. With the enthusiasm for the fans and the energy it brings, and they just seem to play at another. Especially the defense seems to play at another level. Could it be? It's a 21 point spread. I think. Could Stanford cover that? Sure, but I don't. I'd be stunned if Oregon State lost this game.
An opportunity?
The other thing I want to say is that when Stanford has played good teams this year, they have not been on the field for the most part. Oregon ran them off the field. UCLA ran them off the field. USC ran them off the field. They hung with Washington, but I feel like Washington was coming off that Oregon game. They had some injuries, and they weren't the same Washington team that we'd been seeing. So I just feel like against good teams, Stanford is just overmatched. And Oregon State is a good team. They're in the CFP top 12 for a reason.
By the way, I think I said that Stanford hung with USC, and I was thinking of Cal, so I conflated our Bay Area teams there. So if I
they haven't hung with Cal. They haven't hung with Cal either because they play Cal this week.
No, but it's USC and Cal hung with USC, not Stanford.
Right.
Hung
Okay,
with USC.
Yeah.
So, man, you're as confused as if I'm describing the plot of Les Mis. Is there an opportunity in let's say it's a one-sided game? Is there an opportunity for Jonathan Smith to get Aiden Childs additional series, which is something that a lot of Oregon State fans seem to want to see? And I don't mean just in garbage time, but if would this be a good game to get Aiden Childs more than that 1/3 series that he's had the last many weeks?
I asked him that question after the game Saturday, then it got asked again Monday, and Jonathan, said it's obviously been discussed. I don't know. I think there's a possibility this game. I would say they play him the 3rd series like they've been playing him, and maybe he comes out if they have the ball to start the 3rd quarter. Maybe that's a good chance to get a 2nd series from him or something. But, the kid, and I'm going to call him a kid because he's just turned 18. I don't typically call the college guys kids, but anyway. He's obviously shown us some stuff with that arm and his legs, but he's still a freshman. He led the Beavers to their first touchdown the other night, but boy, there were 2 throws he made that those could have been disasters, both of them. And
tricky and picky.
And he's just, but boy, he's got an arm on him, and he gives Oregon State something they've never had. Is a guy that can run out of the pocket and make plays like he did Saturday with that 23-yard touchdown run. That's not something we've seen from an Oregon State quarterback. And so, I think everybody likes to see a bit more. What's that?
He's got a cannon like he's firing into the barricade of the French Revolution. Red. Sorry.
But so does DJ. DJ does too. I don't know. I think we would like to see a little bit more of Aiden Childs, but I'm not so sure that what they're doing right now isn't the right move.
Yeah, I think that is I think that's fair, and it's just it's an interesting dynamic because Oregon State does have an incumbent quarterback or a starting quarterback who like has 4 years of starting experience or 3 years of starting experience, has been very reliable and capable. A little up and down here and there, but there's no reason to call for DJ to be demoted, but the dynamic you have is you have a very, very capable starter for a team that's well-ranked and well-regarded in the CFP, but you also have the franchise. You have the future in Aiden Childs. And so and particularly in an age of, NIL, transfer portal, when there's going to be schools trying to pry Aiden Childs out of here when that portal opens up, you've got to find ways to keep him engaged and happy. And by all accounts, by the way, there's no indication that Aiden Childs is looking to jump ship. He's by all accounts loves Oregon State, has enjoyed his time, likes learning from Jonathan Smith. So, I mean, there's not necessarily a known risk of that, but that's what you're always guarding against in college football. So, just really a really interesting dynamic at Oregon State.
And he's made it clear. He's made it clear that in his one media interview that Jonathan Smith is his guy, and as long as Smith is here, I think Aiden Childs is here to stay. But right, I mean, I was going to follow up a little bit about if he could get a second series. The one I could see is, let's say it's 21-3 at halftime. That'd be a good situation to put him in. His first series of the third quarter or something like that. I mean, if it's a 14-10 game, maybe not. But if Oregon State has the game, well under control, I would say maybe another series is. And DJ seems to be the kind of guy that's more than willing to, step aside for the good of the team and whatnot. So, but I would keep it at one series, and I think, like you said, he is pretty happy. I that's my sense.
Nick, if Oregon State wins this weekend against Stanford at home, which I think as a 21-point favorite, we would fully expect them to, they will be 8-2. They will be a top 12 or 11 team in the CFP, if not higher, and they'll be hosting the currently undefeated Washington Huskies, who currently have the inside track on a CFP berth from the Pac-12. It seems likely that when Washington comes to town on November 18th, that is a game College Game Day will look long and hard at coming to Corvallis for. College Game Day's come to Corvallis once before for a Civil War. I don't know. What year was that?
2010.
2010.
It was for the Oregon game that week.
Right. So I guess my question, Nick, how likely do you see Game Day coming? And then let's have some fun. Who's the guest picker?
Well, I did reach out to ESPN today, and the answer was no decision has been made yet, and we won't know until Saturday following a few games. If we do end up heading to Oregon State, I'll be sure to reach out. So that's the official word from ESPN. Next week is shaping up to be perhaps the biggest week in Oregon State sports history, and I know you're going, what? But it is. It starts with November 14th, the showdown in the King of Colfax Funnel Cake, Whitman County Fairground Funnel Cake, Judge Funnel Cake, making the big decision on who's gonna, if Oregon State and Washington State get control of the board and whatnot. That starts off that week. Game day could be coming to Corvallis. I think it's 50-50 minimum, just based on what games are out there for that week, for that Saturday the 18th. I mean, there's your Grizz and Cats playing that day, but they just went to that game last year. I can't see ESPN returning to a FCS site.
Yeah, I agree. It wouldn't shock me. It never shocks me when ESPN pulls a little bit of an okey doke and goes to a Division III, Division II FCS game at the end of the season. Particularly, I think there was a year where they did Harvard Yale and Williams Amherst or something like that. But do those schools even have football teams? I'm not sure. But as a former Grizz, as a great lover of the FCS. Montana State on November 18th, assuming the Grizz take care of business against Portland State in Hillsborough this weekend, is going to be, as big of a game as they've ever had in that rivalry, which is one of the great rivalries in college football. But to your point, last year, when it wasn't as compelling of a matchup when Montana was a little bit down. ESPN did go to Bozeman, for College Game Day and unleashed Pat McAfee on the unsuspecting citizens of Southwest Central Montana. And I just don't see them doing that same game again in consecutive years. But I mean, those are both going to be top 5 teams in the FCS. It's a great atmosphere. Missoula's a better atmosphere than Bozeman, a way better tailgating scene. Way more people are going to show up in Missoula. Way better fans, way more support for their university, less fair-weathered, fly-by-night football fans. It's in the blood. It's in the beer. It's in the bones of Missoula, Montana to show up and cheer for the Grizz. So would it shock me if ESPN said, you know what, we did the JV last year when we went to Bozeman. We got a little taste, a little amuse-bouche of what Cat Grizz is really like, but now we want the real thing. We want the entree. We want the varsity, so we're going to go to Missoula, Montana, where a river runs through it and where the Grizz run through the Bobcats. Would it shock me? No.
No, but there's 2 things. I'll push back 2 things. One, who doesn't want to see Jonathan Smith right up on a Harley in a sleeveless hoodie going to the Pat McAfee show on Friday? I mean, don't you want to see that? Which won't happen, by the way.
I do want to see that.
I mean, I do too, but I know that's not going to happen. But second of all, ESPN is not passing up a chance for the potential of 2 top 10 teams playing. On a Saturday. If Oregon State moves up, if they win, they got a shot to move up to 11, maybe even 10. And if Washington takes care of business against Utah, they're going to be 5 or 4 next week. I mean, I don't care if Montana State at 1-2. I can't see ESPN passing up a top 10 matchup, especially when you already have Kirk Herbstreit in Corvallis or going to Corvallis for the game. So I don't know. It just feels like it's pointing in that direction.
Yeah.
If both these teams win, I'm actually not even sure if Oregon State wins and Washington loses this Saturday, they still wouldn't pick that game because both teams will still be around 10, 11. It's still a big game because they both still have lots to play for.
Well, and that's a great point because they will both
I was
still
going
be.
into the week. I was going into the week and I got sidetracked there on anyway the how big this week could be. We got the courtroom thing, we got game day, and then we got this game at 4:30 prime time. Oregon State and Washington with lots on the line. I mean, it's going to be a huge week.
Yeah, and maybe even especially if Utah does beat UW this weekend in Seattle, which I don't see, just having seen Utah a couple of times. This is not your slightly older brother's Utah team, but if Utah does beat the Huskies, we are looking at a much more muddled Pac-12 and a much clearer path for different teams to get to the Pac-12 championship game, because now everybody has at least one loss. Oregon and UW would have one loss. You'd have multiple teams, a host of teams with 2 losses. So, not good for the CFP, but short of it being Oregon, and, obviously, we at the Oregonian and in the state of Oregon, care about Oregon making the CFP potentially and Oregon State, but I don't care about the Pac-12 as an institution being in the CFP. I don't care about Washington getting in the CFP. I don't care about USC getting in the CFP for the good of the conference, the health of the conference. I mean, that's like talking about the health of a corpse. So, the Pac-12, can pound sand, but Oregon State, yeah, let's get them in the CFP. Okay. So, for that to happen, I don't know where I was. Do you view that Washington game, if Stanford goes by the wayside, UW takes care of Utah, Washington brings a top 5 team to Research Stadium in 2 weeks, I think it's worth looking ahead to that. I'm not so sure the Beavers aren't favored at home in that game, even with 2 losses, even against an undefeated national championship contender. Am I crazy?
It'll be interesting. It's funny. Oregon State and Washington, the only two teams in the conference, have been favored in every game this season. I mean, the Beavers have been surprisingly bigger favorites than I would. I mean, I would never have guessed them to be a 13.5 point favorite over at Colorado, and then a 21 point favorite over a Stanford team that's shown a little bit of fight here down the stretch.
Pluck.
So they're kind of loved a little bit in Vegas, and depending on what Washington's injury situation is, yeah, I could see it. It's going to be somewhere close to a pick 'em, I would guess. Um, so yeah, I mean, you're not wrong on that.
All right, Nick. What else do we need to talk about before we get out of here? Any final thoughts on Stanford, Colorado, or the rest of the season?
Do we need to talk about coaches' decisions? You know, the Jonathan Smith and blackjack and 2 point conversions. Deion Sanders totally forgetting about timeouts at the end of the first half. He actually thought they had 3 timeouts left. Oregon State had 3 timeouts left. I mean, that's just unexplainable. I don't know what the word is, but somebody's got to get in his ear and tell him how many timeouts Oregon State's got left. That
I
was
think he
part of the
demoted
reason
that person during the game.
Well,
yeah, there was some weird stuff there. There was the weirdness at the end of the first half with Colorado basically gifting Oregon State a touchdown. There was the timeout at the end of the game with 2 seconds left that was confusing. I went back and watched the video. It seemed like there was confusion on Deion's part as well. He was upset at the end with the way the timeouts were used at the very end of the game. The decision to kick the ball away with about a minute and a half, 2 minutes left, and within 7. Yeah, there was a lot. One thing though, I don't necessarily think you need to go for 2 if you're Jonathan Smith in that situation when you're up 20-3.
they're up 23.
Yeah, the difference between 21-3 versus 22-3 doesn't make from a probability standpoint or from a math standpoint, you don't need that extra point. But I also think I get the notion that being up by an additional point is better than not, and that you have a 6'5" quarterback who, and one of the country's best offensive lines, and you trust you can get a yard and a half or a yard and a quarter, for that extra point. I sort of get the aggressive mindset. You don't need it. And that was the very, very worst possible outcome because it ends up being a 5-point swing. Instead of being 22-3, it's 20-5. I don't know. I didn't hate that one as much as some other things. Like, I didn't hate that certainly as much as the fake field goal against Arizona. I mean, I think that's apples and oranges. But I mean, what was your read on it?
No, I think you in that situation, I didn't mind that call, and I know I got several emails and people responded to me on Twitter about, well, here we go again with Jonathan, the riverboat gambler, and he's reckless and everything else, blah, blah, blah. You run that play 1,000 times. I'd say Oregon State scores 650 of them, gets stopped 349 times, and that one time they return it for the 2-point
Right.
play. That was the worst possible outcome on that play, and it just happened to take place. But I think in that situation, the odds were in Oregon State's favor, and I'm with Jonathan on that one. I'm obviously not with him on the field goal one. He ran it at Arizona, as just about anybody in the country would agree, and even Jonathan would agree. So
yeah.
So that's one I'm gonna give him a pass on.
Yeah. Nick, I think we're going to leave it there. There's more to talk about, obviously. A lot more musical discourse for us to get into. I saw Starlight Express once at Keller Auditorium. I don't know if you've ever seen Starlight Express by Andrew Lloyd Webber. It's on roller skates. So there's just roller skating up and down the aisles of Keller onto the stage, which was a lot of fun. I mean, Phantom of the Opera, great memories. I saw... oh my gosh, I saw Kathy Rigby in Seussical the Musical. I saw Richard Chamberlain in The Sound of Music and My Fair Lady. So many great memories of musical theater. Broadway across America in Portland. I'm so glad you had the opportunity to see Les Misérables. It is an all-time classic, as are you, Nick Daschel. And if you are interested in receiving...
Am I a classic or am I a relic?
If you are interested in receiving some all-time classic text messages from myself and my colleagues, including Nick Daschel, at the Oregonian, why don't you consider shooting a text to us at 503-386-0095? What's that get you? Well, I'm going to tell you. It gets you daily text messages from Oregonian sports reporters about the goings-ons of sports across the state of Oregon. That's Beavers, Ducks, Blazers, Timbers, Thorns, and high school sports, and anything that might fall through the gaps of those particular topic areas. We're all over it, all of it, and we're texting about it every single day. So text 503-386-0095. That'll give you a link to sign up, get you 2 free weeks. Check it out, see if you like it. If not, you can cancel. After 2 weeks, $3.99. $3.99. That's basically the cost of Nick Daschel's water at intermission at Les Misérables at Keller Auditorium. And how was that water at intermission of Les Misérables at Keller Auditorium, Nick Daschel?
I didn't get water. I got a bag of M&Ms that was $5 for a bag of M&Ms.
A subscription to our texting service is less than a bag of M&Ms at Les Misérables at Keller Auditorium in downtown Portland, Oregon. For less than the price of a bag of M&Ms, peanuts or no, Nick?
Plain and I would say the texting service is way more valuable than that bag of M&Ms.
So cheaper than a bag of plain M&Ms at your favorite touring musical production. And that's a pretty hard deal to pass up. Nick, you are a very, very good sport, and you're a great sports writer. Thank you for taking the time to join us on the Oregonian Sports Podcast this week and share your insights on the Beavers and the great work you do covering that team.
All right, we'll see you next week.
You can count on it. Thank you for listening to the Oregonian Sports Podcast. For Nick Daschel, I'm Bill Oram. Thanks for listening, and hey, shoot us that text!